X. The truth is on air. City Talk 105.9.
This is City Talk 105.9.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and
Preeminent power.
From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X. Planet X. Exclusive to City Talk 105.9.
Hi, good evening. I'm Neil Atkinson, and welcome to another trip to the biggest paranormal, supernatural, and suppressed news radio show in the UK on the mainstream. It is Planet X live from Liverpool on City Talk 105.9. We're online, we're on digital DAB, and across the world on YouTube. Now, a bit of a special Planet X on the back of our big Awakening weekend. We've all just arrived from the event, and we've invited some of the speakers into the studio. We've got to say, well, warm welcome to Mark Devlin is here, Darren Perks, Magnus Mulliner, John O'Brien's in, Dave Stretch is in as well. So welcome, guys and girls.
Hey.
Hello. Now, later, I know Dan the Man is going to be getting the rest of the crew together, so hopefully just after 9 o'clock, Dan will be here with Stuart Swerdlow, Marcus Allen, and Simon Parks. So we're going to be in for a very interesting couple of hours. We've just come from the Awakening weekend. Did we all enjoy it?
Yeah, it was an amazing weekend, Neil. Thank you very much to everyone who spoke there and everyone who came. It was great.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd like to second that. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who did come. I met a lot of lovely people, very switched on, very knowledgeable people. Everybody seemed to be already awake. So thank you if you did come along to our Awakening weekend. We've got a funny story as well. I'll tell that in a minute. Did you all hear about the lucid light device?
No.
We've got a great story. The lucid light device was there, which of course was the machine which could give you an out-of-body experience. So I'll share that story with you in just a moment. But I just want to kind of go around the table and talk to everybody, because we've got all these fantastic Planet experts in here. Magnus, a great talk from yourself. I learnt a lot personally. And just some of the things you were talking about. I mean, bread is now off the menu. Sugar, we can't have any of that.
Beer, smoking.
What can you eat? It's a choice. When you're conscious, it's a choice. The 7 S's, which will enhance your quality of life. And I've got to thank you, Neil, for inviting me just to share my passion and to be there and to connect with everyone. So thank you. And it was quite a trip.
Yeah, it was great. Went down. There was a lot of shocked faces there, because it was funny how we timed it. We put you on just before lunch.
You were very kind. You were very kind.
When we'd finished, or when you'd finished your talk, the looks on everybody, because they're all like, what are we going to eat now? There's nothing left.
Coffee.
You mean the profits went down in McDonald's? And,
Yeah.
No one's going to KFC anymore. I was delighted to hear that.
There is an interesting story. I don't know whether anybody's seen it, which is doing the rounds, and I don't know whether it's true. The reason why KFC are called KFC. Have we heard this one?
They can't actually say the chicken in it, so that's why it's called KFC.
Yeah.
They can't actually say chicken.
And it was
there
changed.
Is no chicken
it was changed many years ago, wasn't it?
Yes.
It used to be called Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Indeed.
But now it's been changed to KFC. Because
there is no chicken.
there is no chicken.
And there's also the other stuff as well about the chicken being bleached and being several months old and that, and it's the
But is
shelf
it
life
stable?
piece.
But is it stable?
Exactly.
As in, is it stable with anything else in that we?
Unbelievable.
Are we going to talk about horses? Or are we not going there?
I think we need to mention the
I
horses.
said this afternoon, Marcus, is if it hasn't got a shelf, if it's got a shelf life, then don't put it in your body.
It hasn't got a self life. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now, Magnus, are you still coming in next week on the show? Because I've not had a chance to ask you.
Yes, I'm going to be here next week. Yeah, I'll be delighted to
Because
remind your listeners.
we want to really get stuck into this, because obviously we haven't got the time today to cover, well, even a 2-hour show, I don't even think would scratch the surface. But I do want to go deeper. We want to talk aspartame. What else do we want to talk about next week?
Do you want to talk about fluoride?
Let's do the fluoride thing. Yeah. Because the great thing about this show is we're getting, I mean, we've got a lot of very switched on, very knowledgeable listeners, but we're getting new people switching on and listening to us all the time. And, for them, this is all new to them.
Well, I'm sure I won't be surprising when I say this, but crimes against humanity, and I did touch on my talk, and I do believe things like adding fluoride into our water. And again, please, people, do your homework on this. You are smart individuals. You talked about aspartame in over 6,000 products in the UK, but also things like pharmaceutical drugs. There is a place for them, and I don't want to shock people, and I say that I'm a healthy individual. If you give me a drug, I become sick. So how can a sick person become well taking a pharmaceutical drug? The idea is to become healthy, and in my opinion, you need to look at your environment, you need to look at your lifestyle for that.
Absolutely.
And there's also the stuff about the big pharma making customers for life and not there to help people, yeah.
Ching ching.
Yeah. What is the old saying? There's no profit or there's no money to be made in healthy people.
Absolutely. The idea to pay the governments and to keep the banks in business and have wars in other countries is you've got to become sick. And how do you do that? By listening to mainstream stuff. So, I mean, I'm not shocking, I'm sure, when I say this, that sugar is a Class A drug. It's 4 times more addictive than crack cocaine. I'm not saying it's as bad as crack cocaine, but the thing is, as a child, I get addicted to it, and then it's in everything. It's so ubiquitous. And I just remind people that they can make smarter choices and just take it out. I mean, read Professor Lustig's work. All you need to go onto YouTube and just try in Lustig, and you'll be able to find a lot more information about it.
Okay. We will, as I say, Magnus is going to be on doing the full show next week, so we will go, as I said, Mr. Ike says, further down the rabbit hole next week with all the big pharmaceutical stuff and all the foods and what's good for you, what's not good for you. So looking forward to that. Mark Devlin is in, who's come all the way up from London, down south. He got a gig up in Manchester to be with us this weekend.
Oxford, really, but we call it London.
Yeah, to us, it's
down
London,
south.
Down south. But again, thank you for coming up. We want to talk to you as well because in the news this week was, and I can't remember the guy's name, the guy who took the BBC.
Tony Rook.
That's it. This is a guy who, well, you set it up for us. He took the Beeb to court.
Yeah, real interesting case of this guy, Tony Rook, who is a 9/11 Truth documentary filmmaker. I've not been able to track down the documentary that he's done, and I was reading one forum about it in the week, and somebody was suggesting that he actually worked for the BBC on a couple of their 9/11 documentaries, so he was a sort of whistleblower or insider. But he was in court on Monday down in Horsham, West Sussex, accused of not paying his TV licence. And the reason he gave for not paying his TV licence was that to do so would be supporting a terrorist organisation, which is illegal under, I think, Section 15 of the Terrorism Act or something. And so that was his defence in court. And it was held at a very small magistrates' court, and it's a real old school, very small courtroom that only held 25 people to witness the case. And he'd lined up a whole load of evidence to prove that the official version of 9/11, as reported by the BBC and virtually all the other mainstream news outlets, could not possibly be true. And he had written testimonies from Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11. He had Tony Farrell due to give his testimony, and a couple of other experts. A guy had flown in, especially from Denmark, 9/11 expert in Copenhagen. And 3 hours had been set aside for this guy to present his evidence as to how the story could not possibly be true. And so he was up with just one judge who insisted on just sticking to the simple fact that he'd not paid his TV licence. And over the course of about an hour, they were playing legal ping-pong with each other, and the judge was quoting all sorts of rules and regulations and statutes from the law books to avoid the evidence being shown. And it became clear that the judge was just not going to let this evidence be shown. He'd probably had orders from on high that this was not to be the case. And Tony Rook kept asking for permission to present this evidence, but it didn't happen. The ultimate outcome was that he got a sort of rap on the knuckles. He got a conditional discharge, which meant he has to stay out of trouble for the next 6 months. He's supposed to pay the TV licence as well. And he got a fine of £200, which is the most minimal cost fine that you can get for that offence, apparently. So the judge insisted on just keeping it as a simple case of him not paying his TV licence. But the reason I went down there is because it's got profound implications, and it was a real groundbreaker in terms of a legal case, really set a precedent. And there was some local media down there, the local press was showing an interest, and it was all over the internet as well. And although the outcome was quite disappointing in terms of the evidence not being shown and people not getting an opportunity to question the official version of 9/11, I think it's caused a lot of people to start asking questions about why we are still funding an organisation which quite blatantly has lied about that, as they have so many other things. And then when you factor in the whole Savile fiasco ongoing, the BBC is not in its best position at the moment.
I know John's dying to get in on this one. Go on, John. What have you got to say?
Oh, where do you start with that? It's like, you know, when our leaders aren't there for our benefit, then why have we let them rule over us? What are we doing with our own lives? How do we leave this planet to our children, having let our rulers destroy it underneath our feet while we sit round and do nothing? Why are we so dumbed down? I think the fluoride must be working.
Do you know as well, what you talk about there, Mark, with that case is he's stopped that evidence coming forward, and when you spoke about that, straight away I'm going to relate that to the Gary McKinnon extradition case, because if they'd have got him across to the States, they would have had to have given the evidence.
Now, if you're not familiar, just fill us in on Gary McKinnon, because this actually came up during the Awakening weekend, and there was some interesting thoughts from some of the guys who are going to be on later. Simon Parks and Stuart Swell have got very interesting thoughts about Gary McKinnon.
For those of you that don't know, Gary McKinnon was the UK guy that hacked into US military computers, and he found evidence of the secret space program known as Solar Warden. He found lists and images of craft that cannot be conventionally known to any of us.
Yes.
And they then pursued a long legal battle to extradite him to the US. And the grounds for that case basically were that he damaged all these federal military computers because he hacked them. In actual fact, he didn't actually damage them. What he did, he damaged the credibility of the United States military because he found real-life evidence.
Well, Simon Parks, who's on the show later, was I think he mentioned it in one of his talks, but he certainly mentioned to me when we were chatting privately, and he said that Gary is an absolute genius on, you know, all computers, and I think he only had a very basic computer, didn't he, or very basic software, and what he did was bordering on genius, and I think he's even been offered a job over there now.
Yeah, he's been offered. I mean, we're probably not going to find out the real organisation that's given him the job. It's probably governmental of some department. But what you got to remember was this was back, you know, early sort of 2000, 2001. We only had 56k dial-up modem, so the guy was very, very clever, and he knew what he was doing, and he didn't mean it in any harm, but he was there to find out information, and he did.
Is the information that was disclosed that he found was non-terrestrial aircraft and non-terrestrial soldiers, wasn't it, pilots?
Yeah, it was. He found evidence of lists of what he described as non-terrestrial officers, and it was through a program that was connected to the U.S. Navy. And this U.S. Navy, they sent officers, or a cadet is like a cadet program, and they were trained in separate military sort of systems and training and pilots and all these different things. And he, if you look into it, he actually tried to download an image on his 56k dial-up modem, which was going to take him hours basically, and the image was of a stationary structured craft in orbit around the planet, and it wasn't the ISS.
Well, it comes back to the Black Knight satellites as well that we've heard rumoured about, which are like thousands of years old, but they've been in polar orbits around our Earth for God knows how long.
I mean, the Black Knight satellite is said to be, one of the theories is that it's from Chinese origin, and it's appeared because it was pinging off a signal. There has been some sort of secret space program going on And publicly, we first became aware of this was when President Reagan was in power, and he openly talked about it. If you listened and you read the documents, you can see the research on it. There were people before that knew insiders, a bit like the people here that get information. Yeah.
Listen, fascinating as always, but we've got to take a quick break. If you want to get in touch with the show, if you want to get in touch with any of our experts, Mark is here, Mark Devlin, Darren Perks, Magnus Mulliner, John O'Brien's here. Stretchy is also on the Facebook, taking all your Facebook questions as well. Lots of different ways you can get in touch. Probably the easiest way is through the website planetxlive.co.uk. All the links are there for Facebook, Twitter, and also for email and text, and to give us a call. So just get on there if you can get online, planetxlive.co.uk.
You're listening to Planet X. Planet X, the biggest paranormal show on radio. City Talk 105.9.
And welcome back to Planet X. I'm Neil Atkinson, and a very special Planet X tonight on the back of our big Awakening weekend. We've invited most of the speakers from the weekend here. Coming up later after 9 o'clock, Dan the Man is going to be whisking three of the main speakers, Stuart Swertlow, Marcus Allen and Simon Parks. They're going to be hopefully on if they get here for just after 9 o'clock. Right now in the studio, we've got Mark Devlin, a former guest. Also, Darren Perks is here. Magnus Mulliner, John O'Brien, and Stretchy is doing our Facebook tonight. So please get in touch and put a question if you can before, you know what it's like on the show, before we run out of time. Get your questions in. Because we usually get like loads of questions at 5 to 10 when we haven't got any more time. So get them in now if you can. And we'll try and put some of those questions to our experts. Now, at the Awakening weekend, we had something called the Lucid Light device. This was something that was invented by two neurosurgeons, two Austrians who kindly came over all the way from Austria, Dr. Engelbert and Dr. Dirk, and lovely, lovely guys. And they were brought over by Anthony Peake, who gave a great talk all about consciousness and DMT. And if you don't know anything about DMT, we haven't got time to go into that, but Google it and have a look and check out the film as well that we showed at the conference, which is DMT, the Spirit Molecule. We spoke to Mitch Schultz via the technology that is known as Skype, which was pretty good, wasn't it? Did you think, guys? Did you see it? We got them on the big screen. So maybe that's the future. Maybe that's how we'll do conferences in the future. We'll just Skype everyone from around the world. But no, that worked really well. So let's talk about the Lucid Light device. I was lucky enough to get a go on it. I know, John, you went on it as well. For our listeners who don't know, it kind of gives you a bit of an out-of-body experience. It does something to the pineal gland, doesn't it?
Yeah, the idea behind it is you shut your eyes and stand in a grow tent in front of a light that flickers at you, isn't it? And that's the basic concept. So you sit in this chair and you're told to shut your eyes and keep your head facing the same way, and then it like kind of strobes across your vision. And you begin to see, I saw shapes and colours at first, like triangles, and they're just flying around everywhere like a really fast kaleidoscope. But then there was some parts of it that were kind of like a 2D cartoon, like something like you'd see on Sesame Street. And I found it was like your brain wants to make pictures out of stuff that's like, scientifically proven. We recognise faces when we look at landscapes and stuff like that. And so I was like more intrigued about what I began to see, but it was a very serpentine feel to it, I felt. And like the colours like gold coming through and stuff like that. But there was one bit where it felt like I was in a sphere and it was spinning around me, which really threw me. So to go on it longer, for like half an hour or 40 minutes or something, it'd be really eye-opening, I think.
And I think, again, if you don't know much about this, and I'm no expert, but there are indigenous tribes around the world, especially in the Amazon, who use something called ayahuasca, which is something that can sort of bring on an out-of-body experience and maybe, contact higher consciousness. And
yeah, it looks into your pineal gland and releases the DMT molecule. So while you're just sat on your back in darkness, you will go somewhere in your mind is the best way of saying it.
I think Magnus wants to jump in as well.
I could speak from experience.
Have you been?
I've been to Peru and been on a spiritual tour over there and taken ayahuasca.
It's
three
quite
times.
lethal, isn't it? Don't you throw up? And
well, everyone's got a different experience on it, and I'll share my experience. I wasn't sick, and the first time I took it, I didn't really feel any effects. X, but the second and third time just blew my mind. And ultimately where it took me to was a place called Love, because I had a few axes to grind with even certain individuals there. And this was back in 2005. And also I took San Pedro as well, but not actually in Peru. We were in another area. But it really was, he says, an out-of-body experience, and it was just incredible.
Does your experience match others like David Icke and I can't give a few other names escaping?
Graham Hancock.
Yeah, Graham Hancock, where
Absolutely.
you were trying to teach you stuff, you were getting taught by an external teacher.
You say external, it's an internal teacher.
yeah,
It's the teacher within, or you could say that from the medicine plant.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I mean, words can't describe it. I mean, the best thing if you get the opportunity is to go and do it.
I was just going to say, Anthony Peake made a good point during his talk yesterday, that there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of plants in the Amazon. And I'll probably get this wrong. You might know better than me, Magnus, but is it the ayahuasca needs to be with something else for it to work?
It's the roots, isn't it?
It's stepping outside my route because I didn't go into too much detail.
Yeah.
I was with a bunch of 36 other people who just had this out-of-body experience, the actual details behind it. But you certainly need to be with a good shaman.
Yeah.
So be aware, not just any Tom, Dick or Harry when you do things like this.
What I've heard about it is you have to take the leaves from one plant and then mix it with the roots of the
It's
other
mixed,
plant. And what it does is it cancels out the MAO molecule.
Yeah, there's a certain
in your
enzyme,
stomach.
isn't it, which would cancel out the DMT.
Yeah. And the roots of the other plant stop that from
But
happening.
what I find incredible is, out of all these hundreds of thousands of plants, the shamans knew which two plants to put together to make it work. Incredible. So we had this lucid light device that that did pretty much what ayahuasca does for the indigenous tribes and the shaman and the witch doctors, and it gives you a bit of a trip. A legal trip.
And there was also some other doctors around the other side of the building as well.
Let's tell the story. So we are doing the Awakening Weekend at the Devonshire House. If you don't know, if you're not from this area, it's a lovely complex in Liverpool. But it's quite a big complex. So we were in one part of the complex, and we had the lucid light device set up pretty close to the reception where you walk in for our Awakening Weekend event. Now, the two guys who were operating it were two doctors. What we didn't know was round the corner in the hotel part, there were some local GPs who were running a surgery for
ear, nose and throat, wasn't it?
Yeah. So we had, throughout the day, we had these various people coming in with their letters saying, we've come to see the doctor. And we most of us said, it's going on around the corner. One got through the net, and he was a slightly elderly gentleman. I think he was in his 80s. His son had brought him, and good evening if you are listening. Let me just explain to you what happened. So you've got the GPs round the corner in the hotel. This guy walked in with his son, with his little letter to see the GP about his ears, because he had problems with his ears. He said, I'm here to see the doctors. There was no one really there to sort of advise him. Our doctors, the neurosurgeons, just their ears pricked up and they said, oh, we're the doctors. Come this way. So he was whisked off, this 80-year-old guy, to the lucid light device, put on the machine for about 5 or 10 minutes, staggered out with quite a happy face. And his son said to him, are you all right, Dad? Did they sort your ears out? He said, no. He said, I just saw lots of lights and flashing lights and things. And he said, they didn't do anything to my ears. So this poor 80-year-old guy actually had a go on the lucid light device. And he'd only turned up to have his ears done.
Not only is he partially deaf, but he's also blind.
He seemed all right when he got on his unicorn and rode off.
So I'm not sure where he went, but he looked very happy.
No, does he?
No. But if anybody knows this guy, then please get in touch with us.
Doctors again, though, isn't he?
Yeah. I don't think you can get what he got on the NHS. Great stuff. Have we got time? Yes, we have got time. Let's talk to Magnus very briefly, because we're going to do a lot of this next week on the show. But you did something called the 7 S's. Let's run through it and let's see what people in the studio think about it.
Thank you, and it was an invite for people that were present there to just be aware of their habits and to take control. And what I'll do is quickly run through these 7 S's. The first one you'll love, and I know you'll all do this as soon as you wake up in the morning, it's smile. That's all you need to do. And if you can go further and laugh, that will release oxytocin, endorphins and enkephalins will make you feel good. What do you think that will do to the quality of your life or your day? The next thing you can do when you get in the shower is sing. So maybe there's a tune in your head, or maybe even part of a band or even a choir or something like that, but singing throughout the day and getting all the notes in will change your frequency and your vibration. My third S, and there's no sequence to these, is sun. And the sun has always been our friend, and the invite is to spend some time. Now I realise it's quite challenged in this country during the winter, so that's where cholecalciferol or D3 comes in. But otherwise, spend as much time in the sun as you can. Don't burn yourself. Cover up, obviously, between 10 and 2. But if you can, 10 minutes, 15 minutes out in the sun, exposing 60% of your body will do you, the cholesterol in your skin will eventually convert into D3. My fourth was speed. We've kind of evolved to move. However, there are some people perhaps that can't move quickly. So I talked about working in and working out creative movements. Any old fool can work out, but the other working in is to bring in the smart chi energy, and that's slowing the movements down. Study. What's your passion? What's your purpose? What do you enjoy doing? What makes you want to climb out of bed in the morning and enjoy life? And whatever that is, if you don't know what it is, then ask the question. Tap into your own resources and find out. So that was study. The sixth one, it's sex. We were born from an act of sex. I know we're British, we close the door, we turn the lights on, we don't talk about things like this, but it's been going on for how long? But it's a heart-to-heart connection. It's not just, with an individual. And, the invite, I provided some stats on what that was. So if anyone wants to email me at magnus@mtenergy.com and I'll send you the presentation. And the final one was sleep. It's essential. It really affects hormones to get to bed at 2200 hours and sleep uninterrupted between 7 and 9 hours. What I didn't share with you is that one of my postgrads was at Loughborough University, and Professor Jim Horn, I think he's retired now, he ran the sleep research laboratory, and it's quite clear from the research that we should be sleeping between 7 and 9 hours uninterrupted. 9 hours probably during the winter period and 7 hours during the summer period.
What about people who have a little sort of afternoon snooze?
A power nap.
Good, or is that bad?
Disco nap.
A power nap.
Branson swears by it, doesn't he?
Well, and so does my 2.5-year-old. I would say that you probably need to look at what you previously ate, because usually those people that need to have the power naps in the afternoon, they've gone and blown their blood sugar and they've eaten some dysfunctional products. So the invite would be to remove what I call the
DJs.
All their DJs.
I'm stuffed on the sleep front because I cannot get 7 to 9 hours sleep a night because of what I do.
Yes.
I had 8 hours sleep once, 1989, I think it was.
Right.
So what do we do for people like Mark who do
I do my sleep in shifts. I have to do the afternoon power nap.
Right, and obviously with that, you do the best you can. What I did mention actually during my presentation, there's, I would say, a 5%, in other words, outside the norm, where certain people don't need that, could sleep less than 7 hours, and some could sleep more than 9 hours and still be okay. But really, from a point of view, is when the sun got up, you got up, and when the sun went down, you went down, and that circadian rhythm's been going for generations. So really, we start playing, or disbalances occur within our hormonal system when we don't follow that guidance.
Also, interesting to hear about the darkened room as well, the value of sleeping in a room
critical
daytime, keep that sunlight out.
And with yourself as well, if you get that time to certainly turn out the lights, because the photoreceptors on the skin will send a signal from the brain to the adrenal glands to release cortisol. Cortisol is one of the main stress hormones, one of the glucocorticoids, and that obviously is not going to allow the body to recover from the pineal gland releasing melatonin. So when one's high, the other's low, and so on. So yeah, we need to take control of that, and we can if we follow I say that the lunar cycles, but the sun cycle, and that will certainly help.
Well, whatever I do when I give up this DJing lark, it won't involve late nights.
There you go.
I think the easiest one that everyone can start with is waking up with a smile, because how many of us wake up and swear?
Yeah.
It's an S, but it's the wrong S.
Yeah. Even it's an F sometimes. It depends on how early the alarm clock or the kids get up.
Yeah, when the kids wake you up or the kids get in bed with you.
And it doesn't cost anything. These acids that I went through, really, apart from obviously if you're taking the vitamin D, D3 liquid or capsule, all of them are free and cost you nothing. And when you start practicing them, practice is the mother of skill, you will start to improve your quality of life and start to empower yourself and not become a victim to your surroundings.
And you were saying as well, if you want to give up the caffeine, and people say, I really struggle, I need my caffeine fix in the morning, the shower, cold shower.
Please, if nothing else from the listen carefully. Yeah. When you wake up in the morning, when you start to smile and then you start to sing, turn on the cold shower. First thing, that will get you all fired up. And if you can do some sun gazing as well, that's even better.
Fantastic. Listen, we're going to take another break. Do get in touch with us. We'll try and squeeze some questions in before the guys leave. And don't forget, Stuart Swerdlow, Marcus Allen and Simon Parks on the show just after 9. It's all on Planet X.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups, this is Planet X on City Talk 105.9.
Welcome back to Planet X. We've only got around about 20 minutes or so for our first bit of the show. Stuart Swerdlow, Marcus Allen, Simon Parks are all going to be joining us just after 9 o'clock. Right now we're joined in the studio by Mark Devlin, Darren Perks. I've got that many P's. Darren Perks, Magnus Mulliner, John O'Brien, and Dave Stretch as well, doing the Facebook for us tonight until Dan the Man gets here. We were just chatting while the adverts were on about
the question that came in. From
There's are we on the verge of seeing the collapse of the House of Cards? Again, a big hi to Dave Lloyd. He's great, isn't he? He always comes to support all our events and things. So hi, Dave. But he's asking a question, and I'll put it out to everyone. And again, Mark Devlin is very into his Illuminati stuff, so I'm sure he'll have a point of view on this. David is asking the question, could you ask the panel if they think the Queen will abdicate due to the first common law court case against the Vatican and Canada for genocide? The Pope, the Queen, the Canadian Prime Minister, all found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to 25 years prison.
That's
Who wants to go
from
first?
the Court of Common Law, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know much about this one, so...
Well, I'm with you on that, Neil. I don't know much, but we've got to see this court thing has got to physically start to happen.
But the big problem you've got is, if it goes to the courts, what does it say in front of the courts? HM, Her Majesty's, Crown Courts. You're on a loser straight away there, aren't you?
Their pitch, their rules, their referees.
And the thing is, the powers that be, whoever they are, that are going to control this, because we know that this is going to be in place. Is it physically going to get a go-ahead? But because one of the things I said in the break was, is this, and I'm going to echo what Neil said this afternoon at the weekend, was, is this the start of the House of Cards that falls?
Well, we're only just a few days into March, and we've already lost the Pope. One of the senior cardinals has stepped down, very heavily linked to Jimmy Savile. I think there's more to come. We are going to be getting David Icke back on the show in a few weeks' time. David Icke, unbelievably, I can't believe this, but I'm very happy, and I hope he gets his points of view across. He's been invited onto This Morning, the TV, this show This Morning.
Really?
Yeah. They're doing a spooky weekend, so we've got a few former guests. Actually, Jackie Weaver, the animal communicator, is going to be on. I think there's a few other people. They'll probably wheel out Chris French.
I honestly think the public's going to love that, because it's about time.
Well, it'd be great if they get David Icke and Chris French, because
they'll try and stitch him up, though.
Yeah. They probably will, but he's very savvy with the media. He knows what he's doing.
Oh, he put Wogan in his place last time when he went back for the second time.
Yeah. So it'd be interesting. So he's going to be on in a few weeks' time, so watch out for that. I don't know what date, but it is going to be happening in March. That's David Icke on This Morning. Off the back of that, we're going to get him back on, and I know he's doing a lot of big research at the moment into the whole paedophilia thing. Is it linked with satanic ritual? So we'll see where we go with that one. But let's get back to the question with David Lloyd.
It's like we were referring to the House of Cards, or the powers that were. The way I see it is, you've got some very, very clever dark people in manufacturing the world around us, is the way I like to see it. And these guys don't plan for years in advance, they plan for 100 years in advance, and we're fools to think they're not doing it. I just think it's a little convenient that a lot of the public have woke up, have realised the sovereignty and the freedom movement, as well as the law of attraction and all these different dark and black and secret ops that go on outside of the mainstream media. And then we've also got this microchip bearing down on us as well, the very chip. And my concern is, everyone you speak to about the microchip says, I'm not going to get one. They never get one in me. So, okay, I'll just put this to you. What if all of our elite ends up getting found guilty of war crimes or paedophilia or whatever, and they get taken away and segregated so they can't get at us anymore. And then there's a new bonus for everyone where
I'm dying to know where this is going, John.
Yeah,
because we've been thieved from all of our lives and poisoned and abused by our leaders, that we all now we deserve 500 billion each, or dollars or pound coins or whatever. But the sad drawback is because it's such a big amount of money, we're going to have to microchip you, so there's no second person pretending to be you turning up. And I reckon you'd find them lining up in the streets, queuing up with their sleeves rolled up to get these
I don't think it would have to be 500 billion. I mean, even a few thousand. It would have to be
$1 million, yeah. But then look at what happened in Germany, because lest we forget our history, it's going to repeat, is their economy crashed. And so if we're all multi-billionaires, millionaires or whatever, and the economy is a currency of their energy that they control and do what they like with, it's not going to bother them making a loaf of bread cost 500 million, and we'd be right back underneath the foot. And that's where I see the problem.
Do you know as well, one thing that we should really mention on this, we've seen the Pope go, we've now got the Queen going into hospital with an illness overnight, and it's all... And it's front page media news, and that is a power in itself. And John, your point about the people in power now that are going to fall, that's
exactly
going to
the
be a
people in power are fooling everyone else that we actually respect their level of power. We don't. You talk to anyone on the street, David Cameron is the worst prime minister this country has ever seen, period. You could put Yogi Bear in and you'd have a better situation going on. Look what Iceland done. They got rid of the bankers, got rid of the government that were working for the bankers, and now that country is the most productive country on this planet.
But you don't hear about that, though, do you?
You don't hear about, but what you do hear about is 50-odd billion trout or salmon washing up dead on their shores. That's because they've only got 3 miles fishing range outside of Iceland, and the American Navy have been killing all the sea life, so they can't fish.
Interesting points. Let's get Mark's views. Mark Devlin.
I think everything is happening so quickly now. It's worth reflecting that a year ago, Jimmy Savile, in the eyes of most people, was still a national treasure, and this lovely guy that did loads of work for charity. And who would have thought that we'd have reached this stage by now? Who would have thought a month ago that the Pope would have been the first in 600 years to resign? That would have been unthinkable to a lot of people. So who knows what's going to happen with the Queen? I think anything is possible, and I think so much is changing, and I think a lot of that has to be down to what could be termed the truth vibrations, this age that we've now moved into. I think a lot of people were expecting something earth-shattering and world-changing to happen on the 21st of December 2012, because we'd had so much hype about it. But I think that was the ushering in of these times that we're in now, and I think 2013 is when it's happening. Personally, my shift in perception on so many things has changed so much this year. It's all about 2013. We're just into March. As you said, a lot has happened already, and a lot is going to continue to happen this year. There's this great picture that's been going around the internet of the Pope and the Queen, and the caption is, "One down, one to go. Watch this space."
And I think, just quickly with what Mark said there, is, and the listeners can do this at home, is just sit and evaluate the difference in yourself and your mind and how you think, as now that we're in 2013, because there is a lot of talk about the shift in change as a species, the human race and the planet, and people don't realise, but just stop for 5 minutes and just sit there and think, how did I deal with things or view things last year, and what's it like now? And I tell you what, most people listening tonight, and most people, the listeners that the listeners know of, they will see a change.
Yeah,
I can see it in
this show wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
But it's like I've been in discussion with friends and associates, like how have we been feeling over this last year? January, everyone felt really dark. You're nodding your head, Darren. So
January
felt
blues.
the darkness. No, it wasn't just January blues, because I had money in my pocket, it wasn't skint. it was a darkness, a heavy shrouding around.
There was an uncertainness, I think.
And it's
as well.
lifted. It's lifted a lot now, because we found that, we talked to my mates, and like, my mate's going, oh, I feel dead boss this week. And I've gone, mate, all right.
Let's get Magnus in on this, because he's listening, and you're a very positive guy. What's your thoughts?
I think it's all about balance, and it's not negatives bad. It is about, yin and yang. And my personal opinion is that literally our quality of life is determined by two things. Firstly, what we focus on, what we picture in our mind, what we tell ourselves, what we pay attention to. Because, where your intention goes, energy flows.
That's it, attention goes where energy flows, that's right.
Whatever you focus on, that's what you get. Buddha said, you are what you think, having become what you thought. So just become mindful about your thoughts. The other thing that determines how you feel is your physiology. In other words, and remember this, emotion is created by motion. Emotion is created by motion. So how quickly you move will determine how you feel.
Well, the funny thing that you're saying that, Magnus, is I joined the gym in January.
Oh, New Year's resolution coming in here. How's it working
I've
for
been
you?
loving it. I used to do the gym a lot, but like since having kids and stuff like that, we didn't have fine time, and then you work and stuff. But then I thought, no, I'm going to smash this gym. I'm going to be Spartan by the summer.
Right.
And yeah, it's pulling up.
Makes you feel good.
It does, yeah. It's great.
And you're doing it, you see. You want to become the change you want to see in you, and you're taking control, and you're doing
what
something.
Gandhi himself said, wasn't
Well,
it?
no,
Be
Gandhi
the
said become the
change.
change you want to see in the world, but I said become the change you want to see in you.
Yeah.
And then if other people's catch on to it, it's just a side effect. No, it's an effect.
I'm starting with the man in the mirror, yeah. Exactly right.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's what it is. But literally, I think people need to become mindful of what they're focusing on, because all too often, I think, with the news, a lot of other things, is that they can be disempowering.
Yeah, the best thing is turning the telly off, isn't it?
Check.
Think positive.
Yeah.
Always think positive.
Yeah, and again, I've said this many times. I meet all kinds of people in this crazy world, and you meet negative people, and they're always saying, "Oh, woe is me! I can't get a relationship. I've got a rubbish job. Yeah, poor me." And they're the ones who attract all that negativity to them. But it's the positive ones who seem. And people go, well, why are they getting all the breaks? But it's just because
law
they've
of
got
attraction. Misery loves company. Listen, birds of a feather flock together. So you know that those. At the end of the day, we've all got weeds in our garden. But you can rip them out, dig deep and then throw them away.
Listen, we've only got a few minutes, so I want to go around the table and see what everyone's doing over the next few months or so. Magnus, you are definitely going to be in. We're going to go right down that rabbit hole to do with health. The big pharmaceutical companies, aspartame, the bread thing, that freaked me out today.
I'm going to give you the bread thing.
I never knew. Bread's never been, what were you saying, tested?
Yeah, here's the deal quickly. I've got a couple of seconds right. It used to be called einkorn wheat, and that was the staff of life 2,000 years ago. And then it's changed to emmer, that's EMMER. And now it's called triticale estivum. And what's happening, it's called a dwarf wheat, and it contains 42 chromosomes, genome A, B, and D. But here's the deal. It hasn't once been safely tested for human consumption. It was done for all the right intentions in the 50s and 60s with the population boom. The hybridized 1,500 times.
And this is not just white bread, it's all bread.
Right, but then, absolutely. But the other factor is that not only, as I say, the structure of it, but it's like putting diesel in a petrol car. We know it's the wrong fuel, but we need to look at it and say, but is it the right fuel for us as well? And for most people, it isn't, because first of all, it has a high glycemic index. Even whole grain has a GI of 72, a glycemic index 72. Sucrose, table sugar, 65. Glucose is 100. So if you're not controlling insulin, equals inflammation equals weight.
We will get into all of that next week, and we haven't even touched. Well, yeah, absolutely, and we haven't even touched the whole horse meat thing. So we've got to do all that next week as well.
We'll stay stable for that then.
Hey. I just got my favourite one is the veggie one. Have you heard that one? They found unicorn in the veggie burgers. I think that's brilliant. Listen, we've got to go to the news, but just very quickly, Darren, you're going to be coming back very soon. Anything you want to tell us about that you're getting into?
Obviously, UFO investigation goes on. Next week, I've got some new images given to me from Spain of some unknown flying object orbs that have been passed on, which is great, something different. I'm going to be out and about in rural Shropshire and Wales and wherever else I can go, and I'm also going out to the States at some point too.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll keep in touch with the show. You will be back on soon, and keep us updated with anything you get. Mark, thank you again for coming in. Anything you've got coming up in the next few months?
I'm putting together a presentation for a group called Changing Times with Andy Thomas, one of your guests, on the 21st of this month.
Good guy,
Looking
yeah.
at the symbolism and lyrics in music videos. It's not stopping, it's getting worse. Lil Wayne's got a song out at the moment where he says, "These hoes love me like Satan, man." What's that doing in a hip-hop record? So I'm continuing to expose all that, and there's loads to say about it.
And if you'd like to check out Mark's work, what's the best way to get in touch?
The best way is markdevlin.co.uk. All the links are from there.
And some brilliant stuff as well. The podcasts are really good. Thank you, John, as well. Magnus, we will catch you next week, sir. And
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for coming in and joining us. Big round of applause for yourselves. Brilliant. Stay right there. Coming up after the news, Stuart Swerdlow, Marcus Allen, and Simon Parks. We're back next on Planet X.
This is Planet X on City Talk 105.9.
This is City Talk 105.9.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and
Preeminent power. From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X. You're listening to Planet X. Planet X. Exclusive to City Talk 105.9.
Hi, good evening, and welcome back to Planet X. And a very special Planet X tonight because it's the best of the Awakening weekend speakers. Stuart Swerdlow is back with us, and we've got some more guests in the studio. Dan the Man has popped in.
Hello, everyone.
We've also got Simon Parks is with us now.
Hi there.
And Marcus Allen from Nexus Magazine has also joined us.
Good to be back live this time.
Absolutely, and great to get you in the studio. And you're just blown away by the view from the tower, from the mothership.
Couldn't believe it. What a place. What an exciting place to look out of. You've got a view to die for over here.
Great,
It's
isn't it?
fantastic.
Because normally we speak to Marcus on the phone, but he's here
now,
live.
Now I can see Anfield live too, which is even better. Sorry, that's obviously upset at least half your listeners.
Yes, including Dan the Man, who's a big, and Big Dave, who's a big blue.
4-0 yesterday? Wow.
I know. Not bad, eh?
Good bit.
Everton won 2, by the way.
Listen, we've got lots to squeeze in, lots to talk about. What I thought what might be nice is, because we've got all these guests in the studio, let's throw it open and let's get you guys asking each other questions. Anybody want to go first? Anybody want to take us in a certain direction?
Well, this is Marcus, and the interesting thing here is that neither of our other two guests know actually what I'm going to be talking about, or what I have been talking about. So it could be as a bit of a surprise.
The question is, do you know what you're talking about?
It's not a question I've been able to answer for many years, but nobody has actually come up with a reasonable explanation for how I haven't known what I've been talking about. But this time, it was the moon.
Aha.
Again, did we land on the moon was the question.
And of course, Marcus is referring to his talk earlier today at the Awakening weekend, and it's all about did we land on the moon? And there's lots of different thoughts. There's the theory that we did go, but we faked the photographs. There's the theory that we didn't go. And isn't there a third theory?
No particular third theory.
I thought there was one. Dan, didn't you have one?
Well, what was it again? That we did go.
We did go, and we faked the photographs.
But that we did go. We didn't go at all.
We didn't go at all.
And that we actually did go, as we said to us. The original theory.
The original theory was that everything NASA tells us was true.
Right.
That's what everybody believes. But I think I have been able to convince quite a few people that there are doubts in NASA's original story. You know, NASA, never a straight answer, that famous agency. that is also known as the National Academy of Space Actors. Which may not be particularly fair, but that's what we seem to be having to discuss. Because how come 43 years after the event, after Apollo 11, we're still discussing it? It's as if there are questions that haven't been properly answered. I hope I was able to answer a few today, because I have some interesting photographs. And there's a point I want to make here about the presentation I gave, which was very similar to the presentation I gave last year, in April of last year, to the British Interplanetary Society, which was founded in Liverpool 80 years ago this year. It's based in London now, but it was actually founded and originated in Liverpool. So it is a particularly apposite occasion to be here in Liverpool giving a presentation that I first gave a year ago in London, but is now back in its home city. And the presentation is the doubts that have arisen over the photographs. Now, whether we landed on the moon or not, I think is open to debate, because nobody can actually come up with a definitive answer as to whether the named astronauts, 12 named astronauts, actually landed on the moon. What I think is in serious doubt are the photographs allegedly taken on the moon. And that is what I questioned today. I've shown a lot of photographs which have serious doubts as to whether they could have been taken under the conditions that we're told existed on the moon. The vacuum of space, the radiation from the sun, the extremes of temperature, and the fact that these astronauts were operating a camera that had no viewfinder, that had a shutter button that they couldn't see from inside their spacesuit, and yet the production of such brilliant photographs in vast quantities. I mean, there were thousands of photographs taken, thousands, literally thousands, with very, very few errors. And the errors I'm talking about are not the light-struck images where they took the magazines off the camera, but were they out of focus? Were they wrong exposure? Were they pointing in the wrong direction? Very few of those exist. And anybody who cares to, we didn't have time today to check every single one of the 5,000 taken on the lunar surface and the 27,000 taken by Apollo. You couldn't possibly look at them, but if you go online, you can check these. Thousands of photographs. There are very few out of focus, very few badly exposed, very few that are not composed reasonably well. But they had no viewfinder. They couldn't look through the camera viewfinder because they didn't have one. It was taken off. They wore it on their chest. They pointed it with their body. How many photographers do that today? Yeah, it's quite possible to take photographs out of viewfinder, but not under those conditions where they could die at any minute. I mean, these were operating at the extreme limits, assuming they were there, of course, and not in some studio. And you might well ask, well, if what you say is halfway true, Marcus, where did they take these photographs then? Because their photographs exist. Yes, they were taken during the training exercises, quite legitimately, quite openly, not in some mythical Area 51 desert scene. They didn't need to go there. They just created the environment in the training studios. Obviously, that's what they do. Because if you're going to send somebody to a place you've never been to before, you try to recreate that situation as closely as you can to what you think it'll be, so they get used to operating there. Now, how many people know that you can actually buy moon rock today? There are companies that sell moon rock. There are companies that sell lunar soil. You can go out and buy it by the hundredweight, if you want to, by the kilo, by the half kilo, by the half ton. If you want to create your own lunar environment, that's where you go. Plenty of places will supply it. Because I always get asked, and I was asked this, there are three questions I always get asked. Well, if what you say is true, how come the Russians didn't blow the whistle? And anyway, that's one question. The other question is, well, what about the moon rock? Where did that come from? And the third question is, well, how did they survive the radiation? Well, the Russians didn't blow the whistle at the time because who would they have blown it at? The Russian system of government and scientific situation then was very different from what it is now. I will say now that the Russians have blown the whistle. Categorically, they have blown the whistle big time. They have questioned, and this is by fairly knowledgeable scientists in Russia, and I mentioned this, a physicist who's used to working with the Russian space program have questioned whether the Saturn V rocket was powerful enough to launch what we were told it launched, 50-ton payload, to the moon. And this was by analysis of the Saturn V rocket taking off and the speed with which it took off, the height at which it climbed within the time that it had available. According to the Russians' calculation, and these haven't been in any way denied by anybody, to my knowledge, the rocket was certainly not moving fast enough to have achieved the objective that it was supposed to have achieved. The other point is that analysis has been done by Russian filmmakers of some of the photographs taken on Apollo 15 and looking at the parallax between the foreground image and the background image. Parallax is very straightforward. The nearer an object is to the camera, the further it appears to move when the camera moves, and the further away that the object is from the camera, the smaller the distance it appears to move. When the calculation was done on Apollo 15 photographs, it appeared that the background, instead of being 20 kilometers away, was at the maximum 200 meters away. It was a studio. And again, that has never been questioned. The analysis, which is fairly complicated photographic and mathematical analysis, has never been questioned. The third point is that many people will recall the Mythbusters program on satellite television is tried to demonstrate that, of course, they took the photographs on the moon as we were told they took the photographs on the moon. Again, Russian filmmakers have demonstrated that the Mythbusters' conclusions were seriously flawed and that they manipulated the images to create the result that they wanted. i.e., they were working for NASA. Many of these question marks have still not been adequately answered. Now, just one final point, which actually I think puts the whole lunar controversy into a certain amount of perspective. If we go back to 1492, when dear old Christopher Columbus apparently discovered America, well, rediscovered it because there were people already there, and he got there, and he sailed back to Spain, where he was able to announce the discovery of the New World. That was 1492. Within 30 years, Spain had invaded and conquered and captured basically the whole of Central and Southern America. In 1785, Captain Cook, James Cook, discovers Australia. Within 30 years, Britain has shipped half its prison population out to Australia. It's an easy thing to do once somebody's done it the first time. 1969, Apollo 11 lands on the moon. We're told 43 years later, we're still waiting. Why hasn't anybody been back? Because it was not as described. Going to the moon was as difficult in 1969 as Christopher Columbus sailing to America in 1492. If so, how come nobody's been back? Because maybe they never went there in the first place. And the whole thing is, like Capricorn 1, a fiction.
Okay, some interesting points there made by Marcus Allen from Nexus Magazine. Who wants to jump in?
I will jump in.
Thank you, Stuart. I thought you might.
Yes, I thought
glad
so.
you do.
I saw you were, well, plus you gave me that money to do this. But also...
And we got the vodka ready, just in case.
Yes. First of all, I say, yes, you're correct. It was a fake landing, and it was done in a studio. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
But the reason why is because they had been there since 1957, and so had the Soviet Union. And that was done with alien technology that was gained in the 1950s. And so there was no reason to go back because they've been there all along. Plus, they also know that on the dark side of the moon is a Fourth Reich Nazi base, which is very much against what is going on here on the Earth, and is making plans to actually attack the Earth at some point in the future. So no, they cannot go back there at this point because it's dangerous. Not for radiation, but because of what's there. And I may continue, since we're talking about the moon, it's an artificial object, it's hollow inside, and the rocks have proven that it is not from the solar system. It is actually from somewhere else.
That's a good point. Thank you. I'm glad you're able to confirm that.
Yeah.
It's always something I believe, but I don't tend to bring it up too often in talks because it diverts attention from the main subject, which is the lunar landings, that the moon is an artificial object.
No, in fact, if you send a sonic resonance off the surface of the moon, it pings as a hollow object, and if it was solid, it would thump.
Yeah.
And it doesn't thump, it pings.
And of course, it's quite rare in the solar system, or as I understand it, anywhere, to find an artificial moon of a planet that is anything other than solid. Because that is the way that planets create.
Correct.
So an artificial object being hollow, or an object being hollow would naturally be artificial. And I've always thought, well, that's where E.T. lives, because the moon keeps one face towards Earth at all times,
Yes.
i.e. one
Yes.
face. And I would say that The Dark Side of the Moon is the title of the LP by Pink Floyd. It's the far side of the moon, because it's not dark, it's as light as the bit we can see, it's just that we can't see it. The sun shines on the far side of the moon as much as it does on the front. If it keeps one face towards us at all times, it gives a perfect location for an entry and exit for somebody who wishes to monitor activity on Earth but doesn't wish to be seen leaving their home.
Guys, hold that point, hold that thought. We've got to take a break, but I'm going to bring Simon Parks in on the moon debate. It's next on Planet X.
Planet X on City Talk 105.9.
Welcome back to Planet X. We've got a multitude of Planet X minds in the studio. We're joined by Dan the Man, Dave Stretch is in, Marcus Allen, Stuart Swerdlow, and Simon Parks is here as well. Just before the break, we were debating the moon. Did we go the moon? Didn't we go the moon? Did we fake the photographs? Is the moon a real structure? Is it hollow? Is it, what else did we cover? Is it manned by the Fourth Reich, is it? Did you say, Stuart?
Yes.
Simon, let's get you in. What's your take on it all?
Well, first of all, what a wonderful conference. It was really wonderful to be able to have the chance to have a chat with so many wonderful people.
It was, yeah. I second that.
Yeah,
Right.
good. Yeah, maybe I can give a little bit of insight, which I think would back up what the other two guys are saying. You know, as I was saying at the conference, my mum worked for MI5, and my grandfather for MI6. What people may not know is that 1969, the only radio telescope that could track an object leaving the Earth's atmosphere outside of America was Jodrell Bank. At the crucial period that the Apollo 11 was up and running, the National Security Agency of America, the NSA, came into Jodrell Bank, turfed everybody out of Jodrell Bank and staffed it with their own people. And this is precisely because had Jodrell Bank been up and running, it would have seen that the satellite, I beg your pardon, the rocket just went round and round and round Earth orbit, never left Earth orbit. So that's the first point. The second point, we were talking about the manipulation of the photographs. And again, I'd spoken very briefly at the conference regarding Stanley Kubrick, who made that really wonderful film, Dr. Strangelove. And what people may not know is that although back projection has been around for a long time, Stanley Kubrick designed the glass bead screen. This is a screen made up of thousands and thousands of glass beads. And instead of just having one camera projecting on the back, he had several cameras projecting on the back. The NSA was so impressed with, in 1964, with what they saw. I should just explain that Stanley Kubrick wrote and asked to film inside a bomber, because he had to recreate that, and they refused him. So when his film came out, they checked it out and they were absolutely impressed, and they were already planning a fake moon landing. And so they employed him in 1964 to start working on a back screen projection. The deal was that he would be given an unlimited budget for any other films for the rest of his life. And in 1968, he made 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was a huge big budget film, and he had complete carte blanche over the direction of that. He went on and made several other films. The last film he made was to attack the Illuminati and mind control, called Eyes Wide Shut, and he died the very day that that film was supposed to be made public. And I can tell you that the film that you see on the cinema, on the TV now, is an edited version. And I just finally say, regarding what Stuart said, because I back up what Stuart said 100%, there's a very good film called Iron Sky. If you haven't seen Iron Sky, you need to see it. Now, when that originally aired on some of the niche genre films, cinemas, it was pulled very quickly. Very quickly. And there's a lot of truth in that. So my experiences that I can give you are relating directly to conversations held between MI5 and MI6 agents, and it was not a standing joke about the Apollo, because it was seen as the most fantastic hoodwinking job ever done on the public. Absolutely, and they were hugely impressed. Why did they do it? Partly because Kennedy had promised that man would go to the moon before the end of the 1960s. And the powers that be decided this was a fantastic way to get money for black projects. So you get billions of dollars to put a man on the moon. They spent a quarter of that on the original thing. All the rest was siphoned off to secret projects. So it was a win-win situation for them.
Before we leave the topic of the moon, one of the mysteries that comes up quite a lot, but which we haven't kind of discussed yet, is a lot of the images from the moon which people have alleged to have been either towers or tracks on the moon. Some have argued they're mining vehicles. I believe there's a very interesting photo of a crater called Aristarchus, which has got a very strange blue glow, and some have argued that that looks like some kind of fission or fusion reactor. What's the panel's views on the kind of images, or the idea that there's technology, there's cities, there's towers, there's all sorts of stuff going on the moon?
Well, I will tell you, and it's in my Blue Blood book, how the moon got here was, I discussed at the conference that there was that ice comet that came into our solar system that was sent here by the reptilians. Make a long story short, that ice comet became the planet Venus. Because it went into a rotational pull around the Earth, it pulled the water away to create continents that were then inhabitable. And then the Draco drove an object into our solar system to colonize the Earth, and that was the moon. They drove it as a vehicle, and that's why only one side faces, because it's a vehicle parked in orbit. It's not a rotating, spinning natural object. It is the only object known in space that doesn't spin. It orbits the Earth, only one side faces, like an object parked in an orbit. And so it was a vehicle that was used. And so if you look at the craters, you can see it's almost as if they were molded or created artificially. The impact craters of a meteor would not look like that. And so these are all the pieces of evidence that we know the moon is artificial and made out of, and it's hollow inside. And there is equipment still working in there.
Marcus, your views on the kind of the technology or tracks or maybe evidence of towers on the moon?
Very interesting point you make there, Stuart. Very interesting point. It's an area I've always felt explained the position and purpose of the moon far better than some wandering lump of rock in the solar system looking for a home, which is what we're told to believe as the origin of the moon. Now, there is a photograph which I did show, which was taken in 1966 by the Lunar Orbiter unmanned craft. They were busy looking for somewhere to land, basically, for the Apollo program to land. And it photographed many areas of the moon, but one particular photograph has always been identified as being totally unexplained. And this is a photograph taken in the Vitello crater. As you look at the moon, it's the bottom left-hand corner, basically. It's 30 degrees south, 30 degrees west, more or less. And this photograph, which is a very small section of the original photograph, shows tracks on the lunar surface. They're not distinct. The tracks are distinct, but you can't actually make out what they are. And at the end of the track, there are two of them visible in the photograph I showed. There are actually 5 altogether, but the other 3 are very indistinct. And these tracks end in what looks like a large rock, a lump of rock. One quite big one, and we're told, given the location of the photograph and the angle at which it was taken, the height, it can calculate the size of the rock, and it's 75 foot across. The big one, and the smaller one, which is above it, is 25 foot across. And these tracks come up out of a crater, i.e. the track is made uphill. Now, NASA were asked about this, and they said, well, how do you explain these tracks on the lunar surface? What are they? You're going to investigate them. Oh, no, he said, NASA apparently said, this is just a piece of moon rock dislodged by a moonquake. Which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because you could see in the photograph I showed, there are plenty of other moon rocks in the photograph, because you can tell by the angle of the shadow. They're rocks, i.e. above the surface, they're not craters below the surface. So these are not rocks dislodged by moonquakes, they are something moving under deliberate control. What they are, one can only speculate. I like the explanation of UFOs. Mining on the lunar surface seems to be the logical explanation, or maybe on their way home for a tea break, because of course on the moon a day lasts for 14 Earth days, so they've had to work for a long time before they get their tea break. But there is something there that has never been rephotographed to my knowledge, never been investigated to my knowledge. Even the current lunar reconnaissance orbiter, I have yet to see a photograph of the Vitello crater showing in detail these particular rocks. And what is even more annoying, ridiculous, and enhances this idea that we've never been to the moon at all, is that the 21st century satellites sent to rephotograph the lunar surface, the lunar reconnaissance orbiter, the American one, there's a Japanese one that was sent up there, the Clementine satellite in the mid-1990s, they don't show half the detail that some boring old piece of technology in the 1960s has managed to show quite convincingly. So there is some retrograde thinking going on here. One point about Eyes Wide Shut, the film, that's Kubrick's final film. The release date of that film, as dictated by Stanley Kubrick himself, was to be the 16th of July, 1999, the 30th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 11.
Yes, yes.
It's almost as if he was saying, hey guys, look at the title of my film, look at the release date, what conclusion do you reach?
Yes.
Open your eyes.
I think Marcus is absolutely spot on the money there. Dan the Man was asking about buildings on the moon, and there's a bit of a debate in ufology at the moment whether these are glass structures. Do you remember a little bit ago I was talking about Stanley Kubrick designing glass beads to hang on a screen to make back projection? And there's a 50-50 split now whether what we're seeing is light glancing off some of these glass beads which appear to make a glass structure, or whether these genuinely are structures. I mean, there's a base that I know of on Mars and a base on the moon, and we call them Adam and Eve, because these were the bases that humans had to go to. Just as in the biblical time, Adam and Eve had to leave with the tribes and start out a new civilization, start mankind off on the road again. And this is something that is quite clear. Stuart's right. When whistleblowers are asked when did man go to the moon, they find it very difficult to answer, not because they don't know, but because to give a date earlier than 1969 in the minds of many is extremely difficult. You know, Marcus brings up some very interesting points about how does man survive radiation once you get out of the Earth's atmosphere. If you're travelling at 12, 13, 15,000 miles an hour, the tiniest bit of moon rock in space will puncture the spacecraft. And there are devices that have been given to mankind which make that possible. But I totally agree with what Marcus and Stuart are saying, is that the 1969 supposed moon landing was a complete and utter fake. And I take my hat off to them. They did a really good job.
Good stuff. What a gentleman. There's so few of us left. Thank you, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Simon.
Well, listen, we've covered the moon quite extensively. Anything else going on in our solar system that we should be aware about at the moment? Things going on with the sun? Are we going to get these solar flares that people have been talking about? What about the meteorite that we had a few weeks ago? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I will tell you that that came from the Kuiper Belt. And I had been telling people for several years that was going to happen.
Now, when you mentioned the Kuiper Belts, for those who weren't there during your talk, you did mention the Kuiper Belt and a massing of ships.
There's a massing of fleets of of many different species, some of which have never been seen before. This started approximately 2008. And even NASA reported on an almost weekly basis that this object was being seen, that object was being seen, until it became so obvious that things were appearing that shouldn't be there, that is when they decided to reclassify Pluto as a Kuiper Belt object, so it would take away the suspicion of what was being found out there. And to this day, we don't know if Pluto's a planet, a planetoid, an asteroid, a Kuiper Belt object. They have never really come to a conclusion about it. But we have seen from the NASA sun cams that have monitored the sun, these huge objects in the last couple of years coming out of the sun and then making their way to the Kuiper Belt in conjunction with the rest of this fleet. Now, what people don't understand, the sun is not hot. It's cold energy. That is why when you take off in an airplane and you're getting closer up to the sun, it gets colder, not hotter. And space is ice cold because the sun is not radiating heat. It radiates light. The only reason we have heat is because when the light is refracted through an atmosphere, it then makes the ground reflect that light, and the ground gets hot and it heats up the atmosphere. But out in space, it's cold. And so that is why the sun, you can actually pass through it without burning up. And when I teach my classes on simultaneous existences, a black hole in one universe is a star in another universe, and vice versa. So what we're seeing here is the sun being used as an exit point from another dimension, another reality, of vehicles coming through and passing into our existence. So we have an amassment of physical alien beings, extraterrestrials from other realities, many things going on out there because the Earth has become a threat to the rest of existence. We, as I mentioned at the lecture, we are the Iraq and the Afghanistan of the galaxy. And they have come to liberate us from our evil empire. But of course, they will install their own version of that when the time comes. The Fourth Reich, which is based right now in the Schwabenland underneath Antarctica, is connected to this group in the Kuiper Belt, which is this energy field that goes around the solar system. Beyond that is the Oort belt. And even NASA has stated these objects, these meteors, these asteroids are coming from the Kuiper Belt and the Oort belt. They're being hurled at us by some object there. This is even on CNN.
Stuart, hold that thought once again. We're going to take a quick break, but we will continue with this fascinating chat next on Planet X.
This is Planet X. Planet X on City Talk 105.9.
Okay, welcome back to our final part of Planet X, and it was just getting meaty, it was just getting juicy there. Stuart, please continue.
I forgot everything I said.
It was all made up anyway. No, the Kuiper Belt and the throwing stuff at us from the Kuiper Belt.
And so the Kuiper Belt sent this object as a warning. That's why it passed so close to the Earth, 17,200 miles from the Earth's surface. And if you watch the videos that are online, you will see a NASA film that shows some object being sent towards that asteroid and actually hitting the back end of it. It's after that strike that the asteroid emitted these objects that were called meteors around the surface of the Earth. They did not only hit Russia. They were seen in Japan, South Africa, California, Spain, all around the world. Cuba had a direct hit. This was an attack on the Earth. And meteors do not explode. They're made out of rock. They may disintegrate upon entry. They may fall apart. They may hit and create a crater. They don't blow up in the midair. There's nothing in them that could make them explode. Again, when Russian news shows another object, there are two trails of smoke, not one. And you can see the object hitting the meteor, and then there's a huge flash of light, and then all the damage occurred, and the people were injured. But what I find very amusing is that they showed a picture of that lake, the frozen lake, with this perfectly round hole in it, and then the water, yes, where the meteor hit, except there was no meteor underneath. They sent divers in. There's nothing. They found only pieces the size of a penny, and that wasn't even in the lake. That was on the damaged buildings, because the thing exploded. So it was, again, Russian news reports things differently than other places. Russia reported this as our, and I quote, visitors from space, unquote. They also said this was an attack and a bombardment of Russia. They also said that the object that hit the meteor was an American secret weapon, and that's correct. So that's what really happened, and it was a warning to the Illuminati, who tried to destroy it and themselves were smacked in the head.
That's a really interesting angle on it. One of the other angles that I've heard, I'm just wondering in your comments, is the idea that the asteroid threat, or the threat of asteroids, is being used as a kind of way to justify creating a greater presence or a greater military presence in space, hence the secret space program. What are your thoughts on that and the secret space program in general?
Well, you know, the space program is a big joke. There's no space program. It's a show for the public. And yes, they do use meteors and asteroids as a threat to scare people, but in this case, that was not what happened. This was from the Kuiper Belt. And, you know, in recent years, you have seen all of a sudden some object appearing, and they said it's a near miss to the Earth. We didn't see that coming. Well, they could see the size of a pencil floating around the planet, but they can't see a meteor coming in. Explain that one. Again, for public consumption, that's to scare the public. So the good news is the Illuminati are a little afraid of what's going on out there because they don't know what to expect. Bad news is we don't know what to expect. And so we have to see what's going to happen. But I agree with Simon. I think that they have about 2 more years, till 2015, maybe a little bit less. And I do agree there will be a staged alien invasion possibly this year. And I did that show in Russia. They said August 18th. They even gave a date. And I think there will be a real one at some point after that.
Okay. What keeps happening with these false stage, you know, alien landings and invasions? Because everyone was ramping up the one at the Olympics. Oh, there's going to be one at the Olympics, and then they don't happen, and then we all get disappointed.
But do you remember they did have a UFO flying over the Olympic Stadium, and it was photographed?
Yeah, I got a photograph of it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called the Goodyear blimp.
Yeah.
It was where the cameras were being located.
But for a week.
Yeah,
is this a UFO?
Yeah.
It was a UFO. That's why I deliberately went there to photograph it. So I could say, look, I've got a photograph of a UFO. Oh, it's the blimp. But it did look very convincing.
Yeah, you know, guys, that the important thing is that the government took it seriously because they deployed thousands of troops. They had ground-to-air missiles. They brought a destroyer up the Thames. They put 2 squadrons of the best jets they have on standby. And up to 3 to 4 months before the Olympics, I'd put the chances of something happening at 60-40. But as we went through to it, I think what happened is the Illuminati got cold feet. Because the more people talk about this on YouTube or on the internet or on the radio, and the more and more chance there is that it's not going to be believed. And also you must understand that this is their final card. If they play this card, there is no going back. And for them, they absolutely agonize. Once they play this, that's it. They're either going to come out trumps or they're going to be destroyed. So at time and time again, these have been genuine warnings, and these people have gone back on it. I agree with Stuart. I've been told from October onwards, be very careful. But I can only say that this year I feel certain something's going to be happening. The Earth has been, until very recently, under an embargo. Stuart again is right. The Earth was completely circled. It is circled by craft. When this embargo was lifted, and you basically have well, there's more than two factions, but let's just say there are two factions. One faction that wishes to not necessarily support the Illuminati, but wishes to maintain the status quo on Earth. And if that means maintaining the Illuminati, then they'll do it. But there's another faction that wants rid of them all. And so, yes, I think we'll have an alien invasion, but then we'll have something else to follow that up. And during the talks that I gave at the conference, I was warning that people mustn't become fearful. I don't want people to become scared, because there'll be a lockdown. There'll be no domestic flights, no international flights. The internet will be sealed off. And I think people have just got to remain calm and just to trust their own judgment. What I would tell you is that there are a number of first-generation triangle craft that have been back-engineered that are now old hat, and they will wheel out these black triangle first-generation craft and a few little replicant greys. And just as when the Twin Towers came down, everybody who was supposed to be a genuine eyewitness was actually, in fact, working for a news media corporation. And you'll get loads of phone calls from people who are just on the street at the right time, who saw an alien and the military shot the alien. I think people are more awake than they were when the Twin Towers came down. I'm actually quite hopeful that humanity is not going to be duped in the same way. But, just to finish off here, I think that the human race has got to go through this to see if it can come out the other side. And anybody who's alive now are actually privileged, because you are living through one of the most momentous times that humanity has ever and will ever face.
Fascinating. Yeah. Anything you want to add before we finish, guys?
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's a very good way of summarising it, because if there is a staged invasion, a staged ET event, I think people are going to laugh. I think they're going to fall about, say, well, is Steven Spielberg doing a new film or something like that? I mean, his film of E.T. the Extraterrestrial was very persuasive and convincing at the time, but it was a piece of Hollywood blockbuster film. It had great special effects, but we're used to that now. How are they going to do it? Are they going to land the same way? Is they going to, we're all going to clap. If they bring it off, we're going to say, great, when's part two? It's not going to have the impact that these idiots think it is. They're living in the 20th century. We're in the 21st century. Things have changed, guys. Get a grip, get a life, work out what works. And what works is the younger generation and their technological savvy. They'll spot it. And talking of just one point about the Russian meteor, we'll call it that for want of a better word, it was filmed coming in to land. And nobody really thought much of it at the time. Oh, yeah, somebody with a camera. The camera was in a car, driving quite fast. It happened to be pointing in the right direction. Now, it's only recently I've discovered this wonderful section on YouTube of Russian car crashes. Mm-hmm. Because most Russian cars have to carry a video camera on I think it's a 10-minute loop, for insurance purposes, so that when they hit somebody, they can play the little piece of film back. And so something like that happening is not unusual to be caught on film. And hopefully the staged UFO landing will be similarly caught on film if they land in Russia, because somebody will have a camera working. And we'll all laugh at it. We'll all say, oh, great, come on, guys, get a grip. This isn't real.
Well, remember where you heard it first. We're looking at maybe later on in the year. Stuart saying maybe August. Simon, you're saying something possibly October. Okay. Well, if we're still here, remember where you heard it first. We've got to wrap it up. It's been a fascinating show and an equally incredible, fascinating weekend with all of you guys pulling together and putting on some great talks. Just quickly, let's go around the table. What have you got next? Anything that you're working on or anything you want to mention, Simon?
Yes, I'm going to be interviewed by Channel 4 for British television. It's not all about me. It's just thinking about my family, and I'm sort of security links and the beings that I see. So that's something that I think will be hopefully useful to get out to the mainstream public.
Absolutely. Stuart, what's next for you?
Yes, the end of April, we're going to have a conference called Alienated in an Alien Nation. So everyone should come to St. Joseph for the last weekend in April and visit us. And in June, we are taking everyone back to Bosnia to see the pyramids and doing a special event there. And that is a whole nother topic that could be a show.
I'm sure we will get to hear about it when we get you back on the show. Marcus, what's next for Nexus magazine?
New edition of Nexus out beginning of April. The April-May edition, carrying extremely interesting articles. I haven't seen the list yet, but it will be as fascinating as the previous 135 issues have been. So place your order here now, get a copy, and you'll be surprised. And I shall probably be appearing on television on Yesterday, not on anything to do with UFOs, unfortunately. It's to do with my family history. Because my first cousin was Charles Dickens' mistress back in 1860.
There's a claim to fame.
Very few, but nobody else can claim that. First cousin 3 times removed. She was on the train with him when it crashed at Staplehurst in Kent. And the TV show is called Find My Past. It's on Yesterday channel. It'll probably be repeated at some point in the future. Check it out. It's very impressive.
We will watch out for that.
I'm told.
Guys, as always a pleasure, never a chore. But let's give it up for our special guests and friends of the show, Stuart Swerdlow, Simon Parks and Marcus Allen. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Planet X, online, on your mobile, on City Talk 105.9. The truth is on air. City Talk 105.9. Planet X. The truth is on air. City Talk 105.9.
This is City Talk 105.9.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and
Preeminent power. From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X. You're listening to Planet X. Planet X. Exclusive to City Talk 105.9.
Hi, good evening. I'm Neil Atkinson, and welcome to another trip to the biggest paranormal, supernatural, and suppressed news radio show in the UK on the mainstream. It is Planet X live from Liverpool on City Talk 105.9. We're online, we're on digital DAB, and across the world on YouTube. Now, a bit of a special Planet X on the back of our big Awakening weekend. We've all just arrived from the event, and we've invited some of the speakers into the studio. We've got to say a warm welcome to Mark Devlin is here, Darren Perks, Magnus Mulliner, John O'Brien's in, Dave Stretch is in as well. So welcome, guys and girls.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Now, later, I know Dan the Man is going to be getting the rest of the crew together, so hopefully just after 9 o'clock, Dan will be here with Stuart Swerdlow, Marcus Allen, and Simon Parks. So we're going to be in for a very interesting couple of hours. We've just come from the Awakening weekend. Did we all enjoy it?
Yeah, it was an amazing weekend, Neil. Thank you very much to everyone who spoke there and everyone who came. It was great.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd like to second that. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who did come. I met a lot of lovely people, very switched on, very knowledgeable people. Everybody seemed to be already awake. So thank you if you did come along to our Awakening weekend. We've got a funny story as well. I'll tell that in a minute. Did you all hear about the Lucid Light device?
No.
We've got a great story. The Lucid Light device was there, which of course was the machine which could give you an out-of-body experience. So I'll share that story with you in just a moment. But I just want to kind of go around the table and talk to everybody, because we've got all these fantastic Planet experts in here. Magnus, a great talk from yourself. I learnt a lot personally, and just some of the things you were talking about. I mean, bread is now off the menu. Sugar, we can't have any of that.
Beer, smoking.
What can you eat?
It's a choice. When you're conscious, it's a choice. The 7 S's, which will enhance your quality of life. And I've got to thank you, Neil, for inviting me just to share my passion and to be there and to connect with everyone. So thank you. And it was quite a trip.
Yeah, it's great. It went down. There was a lot of shocked faces there, because it was funny how we timed it. We put you on just before lunch.
You were very kind. You were very kind.
When we'd finished, when you'd finished your talk, the looks on everybody, because they're all like, what are we going to eat now? There's nothing left.
Coffee.
You mean the prof?
Accused of not paying his TV licence. And the reason he gave for not paying his TV licence was that to do so would be supporting a terrorist organisation, which is illegal under, I think, Section 15 of the Terrorism Act or something. And so that was his defence in court. And it was held at a very small magistrates' court, and it's a real old school, very small courtroom that only held 25 people to witness the case. And he'd lined up a whole load of evidence to prove that the official version of 9/11, as reported by the BBC and virtually all the other mainstream news outlets, could not possibly be true. And he had written testimonies from Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 9/11. He had Tony Farrell due to give his testimony, and a couple of other experts. A guy had flown in, especially from Denmark, 9/11 expert in Copenhagen. And 3 hours had been set aside for this guy to present his evidence as to how the story could not possibly be true. And so he was up with just one judge who insisted on just sticking to the simple fact that he'd not paid his TV licence. And over the course of about an hour, they were playing legal ping-pong with each other, and the judge was quoting all sorts of rules and regulations and statutes from the law books to avoid the evidence being shown. And it became clear that the judge was just not going to let this evidence be shown. He'd probably had orders from on high that this was not to be the case. And Tony Rook kept asking for permission to present this evidence, but it didn't happen. The ultimate outcome was that he got a sort of rap on the knuckles. He got a conditional discharge, which meant he has to stay out of trouble for the next 6 months. He's supposed to pay the TV licence as well. And he got a fine of £200, which is the most minimal cost.
You need to look at your environment. You need to look at your lifestyle for that.
Absolutely.
And there's also the stuff about the big pharma making customers for life and not there to help people. Yeah.
Ching ching.
Yeah. What is the old saying? There's no profit, or there's no money to be made in healthy people.
Absolutely. The idea to pay the governments and to keep the banks in business and have wars in other countries is you've got to become sick. And how do you do that? By listening to mainstream stuff. So, I mean, I'm not shocking, I'm sure, when I say this, that sugar is a Class A drug. It's 4 times more addictive than crack cocaine. I'm not saying it's as bad as crack cocaine, but the thing is, as a child, we get addicted to it, and then it's in everything. It's so ubiquitous. And I just remind people that they can make smarter choices and just take it out. I mean, read Professor Lustig's work. All you need to go onto YouTube and just type in Lustig, and you'll be able to find a lot more information about it.
Okay. We will, as I say, Magnus is going to be on doing the full show next week, so we will go, as I said, Mr. Ike says, further down the rabbit hole next week with all the big pharmaceutical stuff and all the foods and what's good for you, what's not good for you. So looking forward to that. Mark Devlin is in, who's come all the way up from London, down south. He got a gig up in Manchester to be with us this weekend.
Well, Oxford, really, but we call it London.
Yeah, to us, it's
down
London,
south.
Down south. But again, thank you for coming up. We want to talk to you as well because in the news this week was, and I can't remember the guy's name, the guy who took the BBC.
Tony Rook.
That's it. This is a guy who, well, you set it up for us. He took the Beeb to court.
Yeah, real interesting case of this guy, Tony Rook, who is a 9/11 Truth documentary filmmaker. I've not been able to track down the documentary that he's done, and I was reading one forum about it in the week, and somebody was suggesting that he actually worked for the BBC on a couple of their 9/11 documentaries, so he was a sort of whistleblower or insider. But he was in court on Monday down in Horsham, West Sussex.
Fitz went down in McDonald's.
Yeah.
No one's going to KFC anymore. I was delighted to hear that.
There is an interesting story. I don't know whether anybody's seen it, which is doing the rounds, and I don't know whether it's true. The reason why KFC are called KFC. Have we heard this one?
They can't actually say the chicken in it, so that's why it's called KFC.
Yeah.
They can't actually say chicken.
And it was
there
changed.
Is no chicken
it was changed many years ago, wasn't it? It used to be called Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Indeed.
But now it's been changed to KFC. Because
there is no chicken.
There is no chicken.
And there's also the other stuff as well about the chicken being bleached and being several months old and that, and it's the
but
shelf
is it
life
stable? But is it stable? As in, is it stable with anything else in that we?
Unbelievable.
Are we going to talk about horses? Or are we not going there?
I think we need to mention the horses.
Said this afternoon, Marcus, is if it hasn't got a shelf, if it's got a shelf life, then don't put it in your body.
It hasn't got a shelf life. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Now, Magnus, are you still coming in next week on the show? Because I've not had a chance to ask you.
Yes, I'm going to be here next week. Yeah, I'll be delighted to remind your listeners.
We want to really get stuck into this because obviously we haven't got the time today to cover, well, even a 2-hour show. I don't even think we'd scratch the surface. But I do want to go deeper. We want to talk aspartame. What else do we want to talk about next week?
Do you want to talk about fluoride?
Let's do the fluoride thing. Yeah. Because the great thing about this show is we've got a lot of very switched on, very knowledgeable listeners, but we're getting new people switching on and listening to us all the time. And, for them, this is all new to them.
Well, I'm sure I won't be surprising when I say this, but crimes against humanity, and I did touch on my talk, and I do believe things like adding fluoride into our water. And again, please, people, do your homework on this. You are smart individuals. You talked about aspartame in over 6,000 products in the UK, but also things like pharmaceutical drugs. There is a place for them, and I don't want to shock people, and I say that I'm a healthy individual. If you give me a drug, I become sick. So how can a sick person become well taking a pharmaceutical drug? The idea is to become healthy, and in my opinion,